So those are not being left out per se, but they are embedded and they're part of the English language arts standards. So what the Common Core standards do, if you look on the left there, is that it's defining what students are expected to know and be able to do. I think we have heard over the years with the California content standards, if we were to teach every standard that is specified in every grade level, it would take 21 years of school to be able to cover all of those standards. So the new standards, the Common Core standards, are not, a mile wide and an inch deep, but it is much more condensed, much more explicit. And as you can see, the second element there is a focus on what's the most essential. What is needed for them to go from one grade level to the next? What is needed for them to build concepts from one concept to the next? And the other thing you should know, too, is that the Common Core standards also establish a baseline for advanced learners. Not the ceiling, but the baseline. There's a huge difference there. So the standards are not designed to define how teachers will teach. So there is still plenty of room, allow for teacher autonomy in terms of how you are going to deliver this content. It also describes all that can or they do not describe all that can be or should be taught. I think we were addressing the bigger concepts. And then also they do not define the nature of advanced work. So as I mentioned, it is not putting a baseline, but that, there is lots of opportunities, and encouragement for teachers and students to learn beyond just that basic level. Okay, so the heart and soul of the Common Core standards, as I mentioned, is the mathematics, the English language arts. But the other piece you'll hear about in the mathematics standards is that it's not just what students needed to know, but there is a whole section that's addressing mathematical practices. How do we teach? How do we develop those conceptual understandings? How do we, teach so that students can apply what they have learned in the problem solving? And of course, building around the college and career readiness standards. So at this point, Helena is going to cover the ELA part as well as the math portion.
So basically, to look at the document on English language arts, it's 3 main sections. The first section deals with grades K through 5, and there are 4 main domains for that area: reading, writing, speaking and listening, and language. Then there's a second section that's for grades 6 through 12, and again, it's with the same domains. But the key thing is there's a third section that deals with 6 through 12, history, social studies, science, and technical. And what they have there are 10 standards for reading and 10 standards for writing. So the key is the focus on literacy. It does not take the place of the content standards. It's in addition to it. It's blended with it. Each of the strands for those different areas are tied with the college and career readiness anchor standards. And then there's your 3 appendices that come with the main document. There are 6 main shifts that are being addressed in terms of English language arts and in literacy. And the first one is the biggest, is that there's the literacy standards for the content areas. That literacy is the responsibility of everybody in the school. It is not just the responsibility of English teachers. And that's a huge shift that we're looking at. Another big shift is the emphasis on informational text, nonfiction. What was really stressed by the business world and by the universities was that students were coming to them not being able to read informational text. They could not read a manual when they went into a career, and that the majority of the work you do at the university is not novels. And so there's a real emphasis on the fact that our students need to be able to read informational text. That doesn't mean they're not going to have novels, but by the time they get to 12th grade, 70% of what they read should be informational text, right? Nonfiction. The next big shift is in text complexity. What they found was that students, when they were reading, were not reading to the level they needed to be reading at. So when they talk about text complexity, the biggest thing you look at is the academic vocabulary. That's part of it. as well as what is the makeup of the sentences and the paragraphs, and are they increasing in complexity as the students move on. In terms of writing, that there is a shift to arguments. So prior to, a lot of the writing students would do is they were able to give their opinions, they were able to talk about what they did over the summer, and what they're saying now is you can no longer give an opinion unless it is grounded in evidence. So you have to be able to cite what you're reading to say why you are giving the opinion you're giving. You have to give the argument. It has to be based on the evidence that you have. And then it also has to be geared to the audience that you're presenting, so that you have to have perspectives based on what is the audience that you're writing to. There is a huge focus on collaborative conversations, so that students should be working in teams. When you think about university work or you think about work in the business world, people work in teams. They don't work in isolation. So that's a big shift that we need to look at. And then the last thing is integration of media sources. And when we're looking at that is where are students getting the materials from? And we're going to talk a little bit more of that when we get into the technology aspects of Common Core. But the big thing is that Common Core addresses technology and the integration of it into our courses. In terms of mathematics, K-8 is organized by domain. So depending on which grade level, there's K through 5, that their domains shift depending on where you're at. So for example, counting and cardinality is only in kindergarten. Once you hit 3rd grade, you move into fractions. So depending on what grade level you're at, the domains shift. When you get into 6 through 8, the middle school, again, you're having more things added in that are building up into algebra, like expressions and equations. The big change is that statistics and probability is being taught in 6 through 8. And actually, when you get into statistics and probability, there is a huge increase all the way through 12th grade. A really big shift of statistics being taught. And again, that comes from the business world, that we need students to be able to work in that area in order to work successfully in business. There's only one domain that actually goes K8 rather, and that's geometry. So geometry grows across all of it. Another piece of the organization of the math document is these 8 standards for mathematical practice. So there's 2 sets of standards within the math structure. One is the content standards, the grade level standards, and the other is these 8 standards for mathematical practice, which is overarching for all K through 12.
Excuse me. What is cardinality?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Counting and knowing what numbers are all about.
Thank you.
So there's a real emphasis on developing number sense